So welcome everyone. This is Meet the Candidates for Utah County Clerk and Auditor. I'm Larry Meyers, the Executive Director of the Platform Republicans Political Action Committee, or Platform Republicans PAC. We're the organization hosting this tonight. Appreciate those who have helped put it together. We appreciate those candidates who are participating tonight. We've got Josh Daniels, Greg Graves, and Wendy Hart. And the fourth candidate, Jason Christensen, was not able to participate tonight. So we appreciate the three who are here with us and welcome all of you who are either County Central Committee members from Utah County or other interested parties, hopefully some Utah County voters who want to get a feel for these candidates and give their input also. So thanks for being with us. We always like to start with a prayer at our events because we recognize the importance of God in our lives. I've invited Lowell Nelson, one of our board members, to give the opening prayer.
Our Father in heaven, we are grateful this evening to gather for this event to meet the candidates and to ask them questions. The candidates for the Utah County Clerk Auditor, we appreciate their willingness to serve in public office and know that it's not easy. We appreciate their courage and the ideological positions they are taking and the marvelous service that they have rendered in various capacities in the past. We pray that each one of us will be thoughtful in our consideration of each of these candidates and arrive at a conclusion which will redound to the benefit and the blessing of the whole county. Please bless us in this meeting tonight, this evening, that we'll have an open mind, open hearts, and hear what these candidates have to say and understand them and be in a better position, better able to cast an informed vote. We appreciate the PAC. We appreciate the liberties that we enjoy in this state and this country, and pray that we will merit these blessings. We'll continue to merit these blessings by our own actions, by taking responsibility and being ever vigilant in safeguarding our freedoms. And for these good blessings we pray and give thee our thanks in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Lowell. That was wonderful. A great way to start our event tonight. So I'll briefly just introduce the PAC and then I'll go over the format that we're going to follow tonight. And then we'll jump right into it with introductions from the candidates and then questions that we have for the candidates. So the Platform Republican PAC was created last year in 2020. Our purpose mainly is to raise money for candidates who are committed to the Utah Republican platform. And we have endorsed and supported financially candidates for the Utah legislature, for the Utah House and the Utah Senate. But we're also interested in races across the state. We've hosted a variety of Meet the Candidate events and talked about a variety of Utah issues. And so we thought as a service to the voters, we would tonight host this meeting and give these candidates a chance to introduce themselves and also let people get to know us, the Platform Republicans PAC, and what we do. So you're welcome to go to our website. It's platformrepublican.com. You can check us out there. You can also see us on Facebook. We have a fairly active Facebook group, Utah Platform Republicans PAC. And we'd love to engage with you and have your input and have you get involved with our mission of supporting these types of platform candidates. With that introduction, I want to go through the process tonight. We'll have each candidate will do a 3-minute introduction. And we've got a timekeeper. Lisa is going to be our timekeeper tonight. And so if you hear a ding from her timekeeping, you'll know that it's time to wrap up. And then after that, we've had people submit questions ahead of time. And so I already have quite a list of questions that have come in from our email and our information that we sent out to people we invited. Some of these questions are pretty basic, simple, and some are a little more complex and hard-hitting. So I hope no one feels like there's any gotcha moments. I think you've all been through this a few times already with these Meet the Candidate events. So hopefully there won't be any big surprises here tonight. But that's the fun of live politics is getting to know the candidates under these types of pressures. So I'm just going to start in alphabetical order with Josh. We'll give Josh 3 minutes to introduce himself, and then Greg can introduce himself, and then Wendy. And then after that, we'll start in with the question and answer period. So Josh, you're up. Welcome.
Great. Thanks, Larry. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. It's great to be with all of you. My name's Josh Daniels. I live in Saratoga Springs. I've been involved in the Republican Party for many, many years in a variety of different roles, and as volunteer, as party leader, working on campaigns and those kinds of things. About 2.5 years ago, my friend Amelia Powers Gardner became the county clerk auditor, and she recruited me to come and help her turn around the county clerk's office. And in the last 2.5 years, I've worked as the chief deputy in the office, really overseeing our day-to-day operations, implementation of a variety of reforms. And I'd like to continue that process. There's so much work that we have done and so much work that is yet to do, and so much work that's still underway. If you look at the 2018 election in Utah County, we had a lot of challenges, long lines. Congresswoman Mia Love lost on a very close election, and that congressional seat flipped over to the Democrats for a little while. And many people feel like, had our election been smoother, that maybe it could have been different. Well, in 2020, we were able to see really the fruits of a lot of labor in turning around our operations. We got some new systems and kind of redesigned how we administer elections to really focus on efficiency. We increased security, we increased transparency, and we'd like to continue to do those things. All of the election challenges around the country, I think, underscore the importance of having transparency, security, and efficiency in election operations. I'm sure there'll be opportunities to get into the details of what we've done in election administration, but there's really no stone that we've left unturned. My academic background is that I studied political science, business, and economics at BYU. I got a law degree at the University of Houston. My professional roles have largely been in public policy, government relations, government roles. I worked for a Republican congressman in Texas. I've worked as a public policy think tank director. I've worked as a government compliance and regulatory compliance director for charter schools. I've also served in the United States military, and really, I think this office requires leadership. We have a fairly large team of 43 full-time employees, a variety of different functions of county government, some of which you probably never even thought about that county government does, or didn't realize that the clerk and the auditor oversee those particular functions. But really, our success in that office has been in terms of leadership, turning around the culture, getting our team motivated and focused on certain kinds of improvement. And I think I can continue to do that well and serve Utah County well. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Josh, and appreciate you here with us tonight. Let's go to Greg. Welcome, Greg. Please introduce yourself. You're up.
Okay. Well, hi, I'm Greg Graves. I'm a former Utah County Commissioner. I'm excited to be here, so thank you for putting this event on. It's always a great opportunity to talk politics and talk about this great county with everybody. Why I got into this race isn't because of this huge problem with our county clerk's auditors problem, our office with elections and things like that. I just think it's time for a fundamental shift back to the Utah County way, back to the Republican way. And that is interesting. When we talk about transparency, we all say transparency, but I think we should have a discussion on what transparency means. Transparency means there are no secrets. There's nothing to hide, because when you're a government, you are of and for the people. And so you need to be an open book. My problem is with the tax increase that came is everybody wonders how, what, why, where did it all go? What's it for? It's not that we're against paying taxes. It's against, for some of us, it's what are those taxes for? So if they're going for something that we understand and we want to pay for those services, for example, if we want to vote for another quarter cent because we want wider roads or nicer roads and roads with no potholes, then that's our choice as a people. But there's a way to do that. And my problem is since I left office 2.5 years ago, it seems like the lack of transparency and the lack of open communication, knowing where all of your budget dollars, all of the tax dollars are being spent and going to uh, in every way, shape, or form. It seems like it's harder to get information out of the county these days. So that's why I'm here to just talk about ideas and make sure that we continue the conversation to help support as a party and as a county the great individuals, the 1,000+ employees of the county that keep serving us continually every day.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that introduction. And our third candidate here is Wendy. We'll pass the baton to you, Wendy. Please introduce yourself to us.
Okay. First of all, I just want to say thank you, Larry. Thank you, Platform Republicans, and thank you, delegates, for giving me the opportunity to talk to you tonight. I want to give you just a little brief background about myself and maybe give you some insight into how I've behaved in the past in my previous elected office. As Larry said, my name's Wendy Hart. I've lived in Highland for 21 years. I was born in Salt Lake and raised in Silicon Valley, Cupertino, California. And I have a bachelor's degree in math from BYU. And I have spent the last 30 years working in the tech industry, the last 20 as a database programmer, and the first 10 in management. So I have a broad background in that respect. When it comes to politics, I actually served on the Alpine School Board for 8 years. And I won the first time against a 2-term incumbent, and it was just because I think people just wanted to hear, honesty and information and have a different perspective on things. And so what I'm most proud of with my time in office with Alpine School Board was that at the end of those 8 years, I believe that the district was more open to different ideas and different perspectives. Because when I came in, if you had a difference of opinion, it was assumed that there was ill intent, that you didn't care about kids, that you didn't support education, you didn't want kids to succeed. And when I left, it was a much different place in that regard. People understood that you could have debate, you could have disagreement, you could discuss things that were maybe completely outside of the box, but that didn't mean that there was anything negative as far as your motives. And that was welcomed and appreciated. And I've had people say thank you for that. So I'm grateful. I was also very aware early on that Common Core was a really bad idea. And it's not because I was clairvoyant, but it's because at every step in public office, I would look at what is the principle behind this. And when Common Core was proposed, it violated a couple of fundamental principles like local control. The feds were funding the testing, so there were a lot of issues there. And so when you go back and you look at the foundational principles upon which you're basing your decisions, you will almost always come away with better information. And that is what I propose to do going forward if I am elected as the Utah County Clerk Auditor. Thanks.
All right, thank you, each of you, for those introductions. And so the way it's going to go from here is, like I said, we've received questions that people submitted. I have quite a few. We'll see how long it takes to go through them. And I may jump around a little bit, but I'm going to more or less take them in the order that they came to me. And I'll give the time limits on each one when we start the question. And the time limits, I think they're flexible. If you need a little more time, just tell us. And if somebody wants to respond to something that someone else says, let me know. I want this to be interesting and informative, and I want you to each be able to express your views on these things. The first question that I've got is, it's actually, I think, appropriate because we're the Platform Republicans PAC that are hosting this. Somebody put in a question about the Utah County Republican platform. It says the Utah County Republican Party platform hasn't been updated in 10 years. The last sentence of the Utah County platform says, all Republicans, elected officials, candidates, and party officers are expected to endorse these principles and agree to be held accountable to the people and to the party. And so the question is, if you get elected as a clerk auditor, you would be a member of the County Central Committee. In other words, the same as these people who will be voting you in, you'll be a colleague of them on the committee, and you'd be expected to follow that platform. And so the question is, would you change any language on the Utah County Republican platform? So I'm going to start with, I'll just kind of rotate through the candidates. We'll start with Greg, and then we'll go to Wendy, and then we'll go to Josh. And I think this is probably a 1 minute answer, but if you have more than that to say, is there anything that you would change on the platform, or are you happy with the Utah County Republican platform?
I'm happy with the platform as it currently states. When I was in office, it was something that I quoted all the time in most of our elected official meetings in Utah County, when we were always talking about taxes and service levels and things like that, and always referred to that because that is something I took very serious. It's something that they printed off and had us sign as a candidate, and to understand the platform. And it was something that going through convention that we were very familiar with and asked questions on it all the time. So it is something that I strongly believe in. That is why I am a Republican, because of those beliefs, because they match most closely my core beliefs.
Thank you. Wendy?
The short answer is that I support the platform as is. I once upon a time when I was trying to figure out my political leanings, I mean, I was raised in California, but my parents were both lifelong Republicans. And so I wanted to make sure that I knew where I stood on things vis-a-vis the different parties. And so many decades ago, many decades ago, I did actually do a comparison between, and I don't remember whether, it was probably more national, but I did compare, the Democrat platform with the Republican platform. And because especially when you're young, you kind of feel like maybe it sounds, maybe more emotionally appealing. And when I read them, the words of the Republican platform they're true. They just stand for truth. And so and especially Utah counties, every time I read it or hear it, I'm just struck by the amount of truth that is there. So I'm very happy with it. I have no desire to change it.
Thank you. And Josh?
No changes. I've been privileged to serve on the Constitution and Bylaws Committee for the Utah County Republican Party. I was once the vice chair of the County Republican Party, and was once a legislative district chair. And in those various roles, there were times I actually served on some ad hoc and subcommittees to review the platform to determine if there were changes that we might propose. And so I've been able to read it a number of times. The Utah County Republican platform is really nice. It's only 2 pages long. It's very much principles oriented rather than particular policies. I think it's worded quite simply and in a way that anybody can understand it and still apply it to public policy. So I actually think we have a very strong county platform. What I would like to see happen is government following the platform more frequently. In particular, our Republican officials at every level of government. I care a lot about school choice. There's a sentence I love in the Utah County Republican platform. It says, to promote excellence in the context of education, consumer choice in education should be encouraged. I don't see a lot of encouragement of that statewide in the state of Utah. I think we need to do more work there. But anyways, I like our county platform.
All right, thank you each for your comments on that question. I'll move on to the next category, which is more about the duties of the office that you're running for. And I think some of this may be kind of basic, but I think the questioners want to know how well you understand the job, or at least what your understanding of it is. So the first question here about that is specifically, and it asks to be specific, what are the duties of the county clerk? And that's as opposed to the county auditor side of things. So what are the duties of the clerk? And I'll start with Wendy, and then we'll go to Josh, and then we'll go to Greg on this one. And I think this is probably a 1 minute or less type of answer too.
So the clerk's duties are elections, records, including things like the minutes of the commission, posting those within the statutory requirements, and so forth. The clerk also is responsible for the marriage licenses and passports. And I can just say I really like that Cedar Hills has a little passport office there. So that was pretty cool. The auditor's office is responsible for both financial audits as well as performance audits on, so for example, any of the departments can come to the auditor's office and set up performance requirements or measures and have the auditor's office give them feedback on how well they're accomplishing those things. So it's not just a financial thing, but it's also a performance thing as well, as determined by those department heads. It wouldn't be something that the auditor would come up with. The auditor's office is also responsible for proposing the initial budget that the commissioners then can modify, adopt, so on and so forth. So those are the duties, and I don't know if there's more detail, but.
Thank you. I probably should have been more clear. I guess I wasn't 100% clear, but I was going to ask a separate question about the auditor office or the auditor side of things, but you definitely covered both of those, Wendy. So thank you. Let's go to Greg and get your input. And this is, again, the question is about the duties of the clerk side of the office.
Okay, yeah. So on the clerk side of the office, the duties are a lot, from marriage licenses to passports, as mentioned, but also elections, redistricting. There's a lot of interactions when it comes to that, but there's another one that we moved completely under and out of the commission when I was in office, and that is also the purchasing. So the purchasing function, we hired a gentleman by the name of Robert Baxter, very good individual, to handle the purchasing, to review purchasing procedures, making sure we're within IRS code, making sure a whole lot of things are going on. So the clerk side is not just the elections, it's also the purchasing side is where we moved that when I was a commissioner.
All right, thank you. And Josh, you've got cleanup on this question. Go ahead.
So a lot of people don't realize that the county clerk is, per state code, the clerk of the county commission, and really the clerk of the county for a variety of purposes. The county clerk receives and files a variety of official documents on behalf of the county. The clerk in many ways is the record keeper, official record keeper for a variety of records of the county. In addition to what everybody's familiar with, being the county election official for state elections, not municipal elections, actually. That's the city recorder. We just facilitate the administration of elections on a contractual basis with cities. But, elections is a big part of the duties and a big part of what we do. We do issue marriage licenses. We are a passport acceptance facility. But there's a variety of other kinds of things that the clerk's office does that facilitate the record keeping of the county and of commission meetings, whether it be minutes or other kinds of things. We actually facilitate right now the signing of all official contracts that the county enters into. And we attest the signatures of the various county departments who are entering into agreements. That's actually a big job. And I'll just make a couple footnotes to some of the things that were mentioned before. Greg talked about purchasing. That falls under the auditor. So yes, that's within the clerk auditor's office, but that's actually a function assigned under the auditor
Let
side.
me jump in because I'm going to start with you on the auditor side of things. So why don't you talk about the auditor side of things, and then we'll go to Greg, and then Wendy will have cleanup on this question. So go ahead.
Yeah, so just continuing with that footnote. So yeah, the purchasing and procurement function is under the auditor right now. Wendy talked about performance audits, and she said something that I hope you caught on to, which is that the auditor's office doesn't create the performance metrics for performance audits. So actually there's some conflict in state law where the idea that the auditor will decide what the performance standards are for a performance audit, that's inappropriate. We can certainly conduct studies and audits that are performance related, but those metrics aren't going to be determined unilaterally by the auditor's office, but perhaps in consultation with the department or with the commission. It's more of a policy issue. The auditor's office really functions as the chief financial officer of the county. So we keep all the financial records. We conduct the day-to-day accounting. We create the annual financial report that's filed with the state auditor's office, and it's audited by an external auditor. We prepare the tentative budget. That's kind of the initial baseline proposed budget from which the commission then might make adjustments as they adopt the budget. In state code, there's this interesting term called budget officer, but the duties of the budget officer are way beyond budgeting. It really is outlining the chief financial officer, and typically the county auditor around the state of Utah is that financial officer, except for in an executive form of government where you have like a mayor and a council, and then there's some different options there. The auditor's office also oversees tax administration, that's abatements and exemptions in the tax sale, and I'll end right there.
All right, thanks. Greg, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So like Josh says, the audit office is really just that. It's somebody who audits, and Wendy talked about performance versus financial. That to me is part of what hasn't been publicized in transparency over the years. The audit office has performed a lot of performance issues, and you're right, performance audits, excuse me, based on issues that come up. They don't give actually necessarily an opinion on how things are. They just state it versus whether in accounting, the term is generally accepted accounting principles. So if they're doing a financial audit, they use the GAAP standards or whatever standards they are using to apply it to. That's kind of the metrics in which they're performing the audit. Therein lies what I think has been part of the problem. We haven't done a good job of publicizing a lot of those audits. And it's interesting in state code because it has been quite controversial at the time. The budget officer has outlined by state code has to be passed and accepted and is named by the Utah County Commission, because we did that when I was there. That law was passed while I was still in office. So it's been interesting to watch that dialogue in this county over the last few months for sure.
Got some good music going there. Thank you. Good emphasis to finish with. Wendy, go ahead and finish up on this question.
Okay, well, I kind of condensed initially, but I think what's interesting about combining the clerk auditor's role is that they're very different skill sets. And so I think that's where it's and one of the reasons why I threw my hat into the ring on this one is because I do feel like I have the skill sets for both that are kind of a disparate, group of skills. With the auditor's office is more numbers and finances, and the clerk is dealing with the records and the details, as well as the elections and things like that. So it is an interesting mix of skills. But the overall principle behind it is those things like fiscal accountability, transparency, and so forth. And so I think that the elected official kind of gives that direction, and then you hire the people underneath you. But I do feel like I have an innate interest in all the things that the clerk auditor's office does provide. So
that was a great lead into the next question that I have here. So I appreciate you leading with that, Wendy. On the next one here, we'll start with Greg, and then we'll go Wendy, then we'll go Josh. And the question is about these duties. Should the clerk auditor position be divided? In other words, somehow separate the two so that they're two different positions, and explain your answer, yes or no. So Greg, go ahead. And you're muted.
That's probably the way most people prefer me. So I could probably answer this for Josh and Wendy. We have actually been asked this at every event, so it's been fun. My answer is simply yes, it should be divided because of the difference of, I guess, strength and weaknesses. For me, I am a budget hawk. I was all about the budget, so I understand the audit side extremely well. That is a position that that I know I can go in and cut the budget, make some changes, and do some good for Utah County. In the election side, I don't actually think they're doing anything necessarily wrong, but because of the time commitment and things like that to it, to be able to do this job the way our county is set up, I do believe it needs to be split and be split immediately. And I'm the one that can do it at cheaper cost than currently being done.
I didn't mention the time on this, but you did a good job there, Greg. Just let's go 1 minute on this one too. So go ahead, Wendy, then Josh.
So I would want to study it a little bit more. I think that, like Greg mentioned, and that I implied, that they are very disparate sets of skills and functions. And so to focus on them, that there is some reason to give credibility to splitting the office, but it would be one of those things that you would want to look at and see whether or not having an additional executive is really the most important thing. I do think that it would be beneficial to look at it and see under what circumstances would we want to split it, and set those things in place so that maybe if it weren't to be done now, but say a point in the future, if there were growth or something like that, then that decision and that roadmap has already been mapped out. So it becomes less about politics and personal power and personalities, and more about, this is kind of just the plan. When we get to this point, this is what we'll do. So I think it would be worth looking into, but I'm not willing at this point to say definitively one way or the other.
Go ahead,
I'd
Joe.
say I very much agree with Wendy's approach. I think she outlined a good idea of, creating some sort of trigger. Currently, the vast majority of counties in Utah do combine the clerk auditor, including some of the most comparable ones to us, that being maybe Davis and Weber in terms of size. We have started to look into splitting it and determine right now the cost on an annual basis could be in the neighborhood of $500,000 more to have them split. So I think you have to make a really good case as to what is gained by splitting the office. Greg's proposal sounds more like just, elect him as the auditor, and then he'll maybe lay some people off in the office and he'll do the work they were doing. Maybe that's a solution. I'm not sure. I really think what we've got right now in terms of, we've professionalized the office with individuals who have certifications in internal audit, who have certifications in finance. And so all those functions right now are being handled by individuals with, specific vocational expertise. And so, so I just don't know that we need to do it right away. I'm not sure what the benefit would be, perhaps in the future, and the roadmap concept Wendy talks about is a good one.
All right, thanks each of you. And Greg actually gave me a good lead into the next question. So you guys are doing a great job of setting me up here. Greg mentioned that he is more comfortable on the auditor side just because of his background. The question is, are you better suited to clerk or auditor? And explain your answer. I think this would be just a 30-second one. Maybe each of you could say one side or the other as far as your background, or at least just tell me what you think your answer is. So we'll start with, I think I'm on Wendy, and then we'll go Josh and Greg.
Okay, so like I said, I think I actually match both quite well because of my math background, my tech background with databases. As elections go more tech, I think that that you're going to see more of that need to have a greater understanding of the technical abilities, but also with having served on a very large school district and overseen their budget for 8 years. I understand the auditing side of things, and I actually can appreciate the performance audits because I've spoken quite a bit about what kinds of audits would I have liked to have done if we'd had more of the auditing capabilities that we're supposed to have under state law when I was in the school board, but we didn't appoint our own auditor. It was all done kind of internally through the district. So I do think that I have the best of both worlds, and I've just personally been fascinated with elections the last probably 3 years. So.
All right, thank you, Josh.
One of the elements of my background being law is actually very on point to both sides. Both things are very regulated by state law, and compliance is very important. I'm probably in the state code on a regular basis, determining exactly how we need to proceed. It is particularly in complex and challenging situations. So that's been a helpful background. Another big element of my background is quantitative analysis and financial information. I did a lot of that when I was at the think tank. I actually studied the 50 largest cities in Utah, dug into their budgets and specifics about their operations to basically analyze and compare city governments. And so I think I might tend towards the audit side for that reason. Financial forecasting, quantitative analysis, those are things that I have a strength in and that I have a passion for. We've also applied that skill set though to elections as we've looked at our operations and sought to optimize. We measure everything, we study everything. We very much have a data-driven approach to how we build our operations and how we run elections.
Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, so I would say I actually, because of my experience as a commissioner, would tend to be like Josh. I can do either one, although I am a budget guy, so audit, if they were split, would be my preference. I am very familiar with both people, but like Josh mentioned, maybe my plan is this and that. Well, yeah, electing me does eliminate some positions in the county. That is the whole point, to having somebody in that office that can actually do the job. When you have somebody that right now, the highest paid person in the auditor's office makes more than the clerk auditor themselves. Well, I bring a skill set that I don't need that position in there. So those are cuts and things that I can do immediately. So that is kind of my background and what I did as commissioner.
All right, thanks to each of you. You guys keep setting me up for these questions that have been submitted here. The next ones kind of relate to some of the things that you've each mentioned, but maybe you could go into a little bit more detail, and I'll go 1 minute for each of you on these. And I'm just going to go in the order that whoever submitted this question put them. So this first one's for Josh. It says, you mentioned you have a legal background. Do you practice law or have you practiced law?
So no, not in the traditional sense, like, representing clients and going to court and those kinds of things. I've worked largely in sort of legal roles that are regulatory and public policy oriented. So out of law school, I worked as a senior aide to a member of Congress. I then became policy director at a think tank. I then worked in a government compliance and regulatory and government affairs role. So I've used my legal training in what the lawyers might call the non-traditional legal jobs. These are where you don't have to actually maintain an active license and pay your subscription to the bar, and you're not going to court or anything like that.
Thank you. The next one I have is for Greg, and you've talked about this a bit, but maybe you can add on to it. The question is, Greg, how do you feel your experience as a commissioner prepared you to be the clerk auditor?
So as a commissioner, you divide up the county as 3 commissioners into portfolios. And so for me, I didn't understand necessarily what they all did. And one of mine was the sheriff's office. It's the easiest one. When I campaigned, I said, oh my gosh, look at this $44 million budget at the time. And I was like, wow, they're spending $6 million here and $2 million here. And so it really was, unfortunately, from some ignorance. As a commissioner, I learned how to get in there, learned from those elected officials, because I don't know law enforcement like Jim Tracy did and now Sheriff Mike Smith. I don't know how to do the tax collection like Kim Jackson does. I don't know the assessing and collecting like Chris Polson does. They're great, smart men, and I've learned how to work with them. And so I know how to work through their budgets, know how to understand what they need, how they do it, and have that open line of communication so that when they talk about service levels, we can talk about service levels for tax increases or tax decreases or anything along those lines.
All right, thank you. And the final one for Wendy. How do you feel your coding, and management experience prepared you to be the clerk auditor?
Well, management, obviously, that's that's the clerk auditor's job, is to put forward the policies and help manage the people that are working for the clerk auditor. As far as the coding in the databases, as I mentioned, once upon a time when you were doing elections specifically, in person at the precinct, there are any number of people out there that can help verify the integrity of elections. You know, every one of us could sit there and be a poll watcher and watch ballots counted one at a time and verify that. We could see the chain of custody and so forth. As we go more and more high tech, I think it's very helpful to understand the concepts behind databases and about encryption and, you know, all of these proposals, and realizing that the more high tech we go, the fewer there are of individuals who are able to verify the integrity of those elections. And so I think that that database experience gives me greater understanding of not only what the benefits are, but also what the risks are, without having to have that pointed out to me by someone else.
All right, you've all done a great job of talking about the different aspects of this office and how you relate to it. This last question maybe is a little bit of a gotcha question because I don't know the answer to it. So we'll see what each of you say. The question that was put to us is, have you read the Utah County Code or Title 17 of the Utah Code pertaining to the office? So it's not asking about the whole Utah County Code, but the Utah County Code or the Title 17 section of the Utah Code that pertains to the office of Clerk Auditor. And I'm not sure who we're on this one, so I'm going to start with Greg and then Josh on this question. I think this is probably a short one, 30 seconds or less.
Yeah, so the answer is yes, I've read the code, but honestly, it hasn't been for about 6 or 7 years. When I got into office is when I read and tried to understand what in each office really did and know my powers for those offices in relation.
Wendy?
Oh, yeah, you'll have to poke me. I forget. Yes, actually, so I haven't read the county code, but I have read the legislative statute. And what spurred that interest was when we were doing the commission information, and there was the whole where should the budget officer reside. And so I kind of have this knee-jerk reaction that when people bring stuff up, I go to le.utah.gov probably more often than I should to find things like that out.
All right, so that wraps up, thank you, our section about the office itself. We've got a variety of different issue-related questions. And
Josh didn't get a chance to.
Sorry, my bad, Josh.
Okay, it's a simple one.
Thanks for paying attention, Greg.
I obviously have a little bit of an unfair advantage having worked in the office the last 2.5 years in that role. I consult the code all the time, so I've read it many times, and I have to disagree completely with Wendy. There is no wrong amount of times to go to le.utah.gov in a day.
All right, thank you, each of you, for keeping me on my toes. I'm trying to get fired here, but it's tough to get fired from a job like this because nobody else wants to do it. So thanks for helping me out. The next question that's been submitted is about taxes. Obviously, as Republicans, taxes are a big issue for us. What will you do to keep taxes low? How have you worked to keep taxes low in some effort in the past? And will you ever propose a tax increase? So it's kind of a three-part question. I'm going to go say 2 minutes, up to 2 minutes. You don't have to take the whole 2 minutes on this. Keeping taxes low. What have you done in the past to keep taxes low? Have you ever proposed a tax increase? And so we just finished with Josh. I will start with Greg. Let's see. Wendy, I think I'm starting with you. It gets a little complicated. So we'll start with Wendy, then we'll go to Josh.
So yes, I am a big fan of low taxes, but I am also a fan of right-sized government. So you can't expect good people to be able to hire good people and not pay them well. So there is the right approach for taxes. My entire time on the school board, I would say things that got sick of me. Property tax is the single most egregious form of taxation. I believe that, I am aware of that. And so at the point that I am proposing any sort of tax increase, but especially something that directly impacts property taxes, I am painfully aware of what I would be asking at that moment in time. So, but at the same time, I have worked with really, really good people, and you do want to reward the people who are good, because otherwise you're going to get people who are not so good, and they're going to come and go, and you're going to lose more with that regard. So yeah, absolutely, I would be willing to raise taxes, but I would certainly bring that information out to the people and give the information so that one of my favorite things that Thomas Jefferson said about the Declaration, I think it was the Declaration, he said, you want to put things before the people in terms so plain and clear as to command their assent. And so if we're going to propose a tax increase, it needs to be something that's proposed in such plain, clear terms that the people can assent to it, because they see that that is the reason why, and that is the need.
Thank you. Let me go to Josh next.
Thanks. So number one, how do you keep taxes low? Well, you keep them low by keeping government operations efficient so that you don't have to spend more resources to do more things or to serve more people. We've done a lot of that in the office, where we've found ways to be efficient so that as we grow as a county, as there's increased demand for our services, we can scale up to that level of service without it costing the same amount of money to scale. We did that a little bit with the 2018 versus 2020 election, where we actually reduced the cost per vote cast by 45% year over year from 18 to 20. And I think there's a lot of innovation and other kinds of things we can do to keep government effective and efficient. My work in the past, I've worked as an advocate for low taxes, collaborated with the state Taxpayers Association. I worked at the Libertas Institute and worked on tax reductions and caps on taxes. Similarly, when I worked for the congressman. In terms of proposing a tax increase, this is an interesting concept. When you look at the Utah County Republican Party platform under fiscal responsibility, it gives two sentences. The first is government at all levels should be required to live within a balanced budget. And two, increases in government spending should not exceed inflation and population growth. So we know that inflation and population growth are forces that may cause government spending to increase. The question becomes, how much of an increase in government spending will you have? Well, let's keep it within inflation and population growth. If you look at the history of Utah County and its finances over the last 30 years, if you pick any index year in the past, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, and you hold government constant from that day, and you go to the current day, and you only adjust for inflation and population growth, the current spending of Utah County government is well below that, every one of those index lines that you could create. What's happened over time is that Utah County hasn't ensured that its property tax rates are keeping track with inflation. Now, whether that's an increase or not is an interesting question that you could have an entirely different debate about. Let me give you one quick analogy. If Donald Trump cuts your federal income tax rates, let's say your income tax rate is 20%, and he gives everybody a 25% reduction from 20 to 15%, and your income goes up by double. Let's say you get a raise at work. Did you get a tax increase or a tax cut? Most people would say, I got a tax cut, but you paid more dollars year over year. And then people would say, well, yeah, I earned more money. When it comes to property taxes, your property tax rate is not constant. It does not stay the same. As your property goes up in value, your tax rate actually goes down. We've tracked a number of examples in Utah County where the amount of dollars you pay year over year over year over year is relatively constant. There's people who paid $90 a year in 1990. They were paying $90 a year 2 years ago. That's unsustainable. And so the commission in 2019 adopted a change to the property tax rate, which would have increased revenue. But that increase in revenue would have been well below inflation and population growth in line with the platform. Sorry, I went long. It's a complex topic that I could talk about forever.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And if either of the other candidates wants additional time to respond on that, we're happy to give it. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, so I appreciate this question because it is one that we grappled with for the final 3 years of my term. So to say the actual question was, would you propose a tax increase? Um, so I have to answer yes because I am one that sent out and voted for the notice for the public hearing. Um, but truth being said, if everybody goes back and watches that commission video, what we talked about again, and I've said it already 2 or 3 times, service levels. It was my proposal to have a larger percentage to get people to come because we all three at the time wanted to hear what the public had to say about the service levels, because that is what really is at the crux of a tax increase. Because when Josh talks about efficiencies, that's what he's talking about. When you go and have your deed recorded, the question is whether it takes 20 days, 14 days, 8 days, because even though, yeah, there's state code, if you don't have enough staff, you can't be efficient in doing that. So I don't believe that we should have done it because we heard from the people and we were very clear in what their understanding was. And the department heads didn't do a great job of clarifying why they needed it. But here's the other problem in Utah County why we should be cutting taxes. We have a large amount of green belt. And right now, like Josh stated with the Republican Party platform, when you talk about growth, green belt is farmland that we have that has a considerable lower property tax rate. That's great so that we can have the agriculture that we have. However, as we've been watching these thousands and thousands of acres be developed into homes, we are getting this huge increase. So the county commission in the budget in 2019 was anticipating $35 million, $36 million in collection, actually took in $54 million in collection. So the problem is right now, we don't need that high taxes because we need to see where this growth settles. And that way we can have a bottom line and then figure out, and also at the same time, have the conversation of service levels to figure out what our tax rate should be, because the tax rate, the mill rate will help spur more business and more growth the way that we want it here in Utah County.
All right, Wendy, did you want to add anything else to the time there?
Nope, I think that's good.
All right, good discussion of taxes. Thank you, candidates. We appreciate that. The next big issue that I've got on these questions is related to elections. Obviously a hot topic since November of last year. And I think I've got 1, 2, 3, about 5 questions here. So let's work our way through these. Each one of them is a little bit different. The first one deals with a federal law or proposed federal law. I'm sure you've all heard of HR 1 from the House of Representatives that's passed and has gone over to the Senate. And many have described HR 1 as a federal takeover of our state election process. So the question related to HR 1 is, what would be your response, if, assuming you're elected as the clerk auditor here, what would be your response to this bill if it were to pass? And I'm not sure where we're at, so I'm going to start with Josh, then go to Greg, then go to Wendy.
You know, the best response, if it were to pass, is to work in concert with county clerks around the state and with the lieutenant governor's office to collaborate with the legislature to do all we can in state law to protect the state of Utah and its autonomy and self-government from federal takeover. There are some troubling things in HR 1. And I think that's the place where we fight the battle, is together as a state with our legislature, with our governor, with our lieutenant governor. We push back against the federal government. Nullification now, but we do all we can, and we assert states' rights under the 10th Amendment.
And I didn't give a time limit on that, but Josh, you did a good job of staying on a minute. So we'll go with a minute on this one. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I obviously am against this. It's the thing that has probably been most controversial that I've talked about a lot, and that is election integrity. I have personally witnessed and seen how politicians try and retain their power by manipulating and changing the way we vote. And to me, this is just another reach of that. Anytime the federal government is reaching for something, it's a problem. I did have the opportunity to go to the White House with a lot of the legislators, and when we met with President Trump's cabinet, they talked about states' rights. It was refreshing to hear that from our federal government, and it's sad that we lost that. We need to fight really hard to get that back.
So I was at the Government Operations Interim Committee just last Tuesday, And it was very interesting because the legislature, that committee was addressing not specifically HR1, but I think in preparation for HR1 about, the level of enforcement. What do you do when the feds come in and dictate? From my plain read of the Constitution, HR1 would be blatantly unconstitutional. And so, where the states have been given, and the state legislatures specifically when it comes to, presidential elections and electors and electoral college, the states are supposed to be sovereign, as Justice Roberts says, and sometimes they have to act like it. So I agree with Josh that it wouldn't be something that I would go, just do all on my own and think that I would have success with that. But at the same time, anything that would violate my oath of office, I would absolutely not do. But there is a way to do that, working with the legislature, with the attorney general, with the lieutenant governor's office. But from my read of HR1 and the Constitution, it's unconstitutional.
All right, thank you each for answering that question. The next one regarding elections is, what steps would you take to assure voter tabulation machines are operating correctly and have not been tampered with? And so we'll go Greg, Wendy, Josh on this question, and let's go at least 1 minute on this.
So this is one part where, as commissioner, I did have the opportunity to go and participate in that. They test them regularly, do things like that. This is the one area that this county does a fantastic job. I know that it sometimes feels slow in reporting, and we can get into those things on whether or not we should do a better job there. But as far as this county making sure everybody from IT to the clerk's office to the commission has always made sure this is a priority, whether it's a funding issue, it's an equipment issue, battery, whatever it is, that is something that has always been done extremely well in this county.
Wendy?
Okay. Got to keep me on point.
Yeah, no, you're good.
Yeah, so I do think that there may be possibilities for full-on forensic audits from time to time that might be of benefit. I do think that there are some basic things that are already in place that are being done. Where I think that I would add to what is already being done is putting that information out in a much more public way, not just having people come in and see how it's done, but let's put it out there so that people can feel confident in what is being done. I know that there are a lot of ways of, some of the things that they're doing, testing those ballots. Is it reading it correctly? Can you go back and look at the physical paper ballot, find that and match it up with the optical scan? So there are things like that. How does that end up being tabulated? Because there are ways around it if it's misreading it. So, but yeah, I would not be opposed to looking at what we're doing, pushing that out for the regular populace. But if there are holes that I can foresee, making the case to the people for even further forensic audits.
Thanks. And Josh?
So currently, state and federal law actually require something called a logic and accuracy test. In the state of Utah, this is public. So we put out a public notice ahead of our public logic and accuracy test, and we publish the results of that. Anybody can come and watch. What that means is that we actually go through a testing of the machine before each and every election. And we go through a full, essentially assessment of the machine's abilities and ensure that it's tabulating correctly. Another important piece of the puzzle is how we handle the machines day to day in off times when we're not running an election. So we actually brought all of our equipment under the same roof here at the county building, where we actually have a secure facility, double locks, 24/7 security monitoring, both a security and alarm system and surveillance cameras. When we actually do tabulation, we always have at least 2 people that are participating and kind of checking each other. We make sure that the staff that are using that equipment are properly trained. So I mean, there's a robust amount of security practices that go into using the equipment, preparing it, and so forth.
All right, let's stay on the theme of voting machines. This question is kind of specific, and it's probably just a 30-second answer. And some of you, I don't know what you might know about it or not, but here's the question. Has the validity / accuracy of the RCV voting machines recently purchased by Utah County been verified? And so this question is specifically in regards to the RCV voting machines and whether or not they have been verified as accurate. And so with that one, I think we'll start with Wendy, then Josh, then Greg.
So what I do know about from what I understand, the ranked choice voting tabulator that we have in Utah County is one that has been tested in a lab that the Federal Election Assistance Committee oversees, but it has not been approved by the Election Assistance Committee. And they have access to source code and things like that. So that would be something to look into. I know that the Votes app has that they've responded. MIT made some comments about the Votes app, that they have concerns about the security on that level, and then the Votes people push back on that. So I would be more inclined to want to have full source code verification as opposed to just having been tested in a lab. But that's about as much as I know about it.
Thanks, Josh.
So yeah, there's no special machine that with ranked choice voting. We use all the same paper ballots. We use all the same optical scanners. We use the same election management system from our vendor, ES&S. All that happens, and Wendy, touched on this, is that the final report that comes out is run through a utility tool that will run the counting process. And she's correct, that software tool has been tested by a voting system test laboratory, which is licensed by the Election Assistance Commission, which is a federal body to try to promote basically high quality equipment and software in the election industry. So yeah, we have great systems when it comes to ranked choice voting. And of course, if anybody wants, they could always come in and we could spread the paper ballots around on the tables, and we could do it the old method that Lowell Nelson taught me years ago. And I still remember because he was a good teacher. But that's a little bit about the ranked choice voting system that we have.
Greg?
So I think your original question said, what hasn't been verified? I think Josh's question is more or less why I'm a cynic, or Josh's answer, excuse me, not because I don't trust Josh or Amelia in the great job that they've been doing. Anytime something's inspected by the federal government, it seems to be something that potentially has flaws. And so for me, that's just where I come from on that issue.
All right, thanks for your answers on that. We're going to stay on the issue of voting. There's two questions that were submitted, and I think they somewhat go together because they deal with the organization called Fair Vote or the website fairvote.org. And so I'm going to do the second question first. I guess it kind of assumes some facts here. It says, did you know Fair Vote is partially funded by a George Soros group, and what their agenda is in funding Fair Vote for Utah County? And so the second part of that question is, what is the relationship, if any, between Utah County and Fair Vote or fairvote.org? So let me just clarify that one more time. So the first part was, it says that Fair Vote is partially funded by a George Soros group. And do you know what their agenda is in funding that? And what is the relationship, if any, between Utah County and fairvote.org? I'll say 1 minute on this. And I've been struggling with my rotation here, but I think I'm going to start with Greg on this one, and then we'll go Wendy and then Josh. Sound good?
Okay. So I'm familiar with this issue from the standpoint that it has been emailed to me from 3 or 4 members of the Central Committee. It also, on the article that I was reading, they also tied it to Bain Capital in some form or another, which was obviously a Mitt Romney thing. And what they also claim is that Utah County has been receiving awards on this. That's the extent of what I've been able to read. Honestly, with all this stuff from studying and answering questions from the budget and things like that, I honestly haven't had a chance to really get into it and know what the relationship is to Utah County. I just know that that's what's been emailed to me. So I'm probably useless on this any more than that.
Mine?
Wendy?
Okay. So yeah, I've looked into fairvote.org. Part of the reason why is because when Highland City was approached by a representative of Fairvote to encourage them to adopt ranked choice voting, the funding was asked about. Yeah, there's an archived page on there, and it all of the usual players from George Soros's Open Society to the Rockefellers, Joyce, Hewlett, all of the above. Bill Gates is noticeably absent, but all of the others, the big elite power players do fund Fairvote. Fairvote is concerning to me because they have two objectives, and one of them is the national popular vote, and the other one is ranked choice voting. And so I have to ask myself, if why are those two objectives, and why would what is the relationship? Why would the Soros and company, why would they be pushing those two objectives? And so that is a concern. I do know that frequently when Utah makes progress in ranked choice voting, as Fairvote deems it, they make comments about it. And and so I know that there was an award given for the pilot projects in 2019 that were done in Payson and Vineyard, and so that it's just it's a big concern.
Thanks, Josh.
So ranked choice voting was first used in elections in America all the way back in the late 1800s. In terms of it being a concept for how you can think about voting for candidates and counting the ballots and determining who wins, essentially the rules of the election. It has been an idea and a concept for over 100 years. It's been used in places all around the world, places in Australia and in the English-speaking world of democracy where we have elections. In terms of Fairvote, Fairvote's a national nonprofit group that supports and advocates for ranked choice voting. There are other nonprofit groups that advocate for ranked choice voting, not just Fairvote. I think Fairvote, that's a clever name, Fairvote. They started out as something boring, the Center for Voting and Democracy. And they get donations from a variety of sources, probably some of these foundations that George Soros is involved in. George Soros is one of these guys who, he's a left-wing guy and he likes democracy, and I prefer having a republic, and there's problems with democracy, but we kind of have a democratic system, so it's a complicated conversation. In terms of Utah County and Fairvote, we don't necessarily do anything with Fairvote. We know about Fairvote. Fairvote has a lot of educational materials and academic information about ranked choice voting that I've reviewed. There's another really good one that's helpful called the Center Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center. It's not part of Fairvote, it's a separate nonprofit, and they actually have a lot of good technical information about ranked choice voting. So I think when it comes to George Soros, George Soros didn't invent ranked choice voting. I don't know why George Soros likes ranked choice voting, but lots of Republicans like ranked choice voting too. We can debate the merits of ranked choice voting without deciding whether there might be a left-wing donor that gives to one nonprofit that supports ranked choice voting. I think they're sort of separate conversations. I don't necessarily see a conspiracy with George Soros's foundation. I see examples like in 2008, where in Montana, the Republican incumbent U.S. Senator lost in a three-way race where the Libertarian candidate took just enough to be a spoiler. And the next year, Obamacare was passed in the U.S. Senate. On a very close vote, that having had that Republican senator from Montana in the U.S. Senate would have made a difference. would have made a difference for an important Republican policy priority. So ranked choice voting can be as much of an asset as a liability in the outcome of an election. I think we can debate that, robustly elsewhere.
All right, thanks for these questions that we've had and the answers on election-related matters. The next question is a little more of a management issue, I think, and also a size of government question. And it's kind of specific to each of the candidates. So I am going to start with Josh and then go to Greg and then Wendy on this one. Here's what the question says. For Josh, the staff in the clerk auditor office has grown from 21 to 41, and I think you said 43 earlier, in the last 2.5 years. How does this fit with the Republican small government platform? And then the follow-up question for the other two is, what do you think about these numbers, and how will you assess needs in staffing going forward? So I would say at least 1 minute on this. If you need more, we're flexible. So we'll go Josh, Greg, and Wendy on this question about the size of the office.
So there's a couple of things going on there. Don't just measure something without knowing the details. A couple of things are, we have a couple of people that are full-time, but they're temporary. They work for us because of COVID-related response from the county. And so their positions aren't permanent. There's also an entire division in the county government that was placed within our department. That division always existed. It just wasn't under the clerk auditor's department previously. Also, we had employees that were, well, they were always kind of employees, but technically they were called contractors. That's a big HR compliance problem. And so those people were actually insourced rather than continuing the non-compliant relationship of an external contract when they were essentially working full-time for the county. Once you get down to the actual net number of new positions, there were a handful of additional positions added primarily to the auditor's side of the office. And the reason for that was that to the idea of right-sizing government, small government doesn't mean a government that is just physically small or financially small. It's a government that is not intruding in your life on a regular basis, and that it's a government that is only as big as it needs to be to carry out its function. Well, when it came to the financial functions of the county, we were not able to carry out the financial functions of the county appropriately. We had, at least in one occasion, one employee doing the job of 3 employees. There had been vacancies that went unfilled. That's part of the head count differential as well. And basically we had some people who had a lot of experience, very good at their job, and they were ready to quit because they were really doing the work of 3 people. So there needed to be a change and a right sizing of the financial function.
All right, thanks. Let's go to Greg and then Wendy.
Yeah, so for me, obviously, I am about reducing that staff because while I was there, that was not any of the complaints that we ever heard. Of course, everybody wants more money, but as an employee, and we did the salary study while I was there. But here's the other problem when we talk about employees with the county. It's not just a wage. Having been there and had to make the tough decisions on benefits and cost and things like that, the reality is it is almost 40% additional cost on top of the salaries for benefits to have employees at the county. So every time we talk about that, we're talking about defined pension programs, 401k contributions and things like that the county participates, as well as health insurance and other necessary things for a normal employee. So the reality is I believe that my skill set does allow me to cut and do that. And I think that sometimes we forget some simple things that I learned as a child. It wasn't the FBI that brought down the mob. It was the auditors at the IRS. So the reality is when we have so many people looking and reviewing, what's the point? Is it a gotcha thing, or is it really about the efficiency of government? So for me, it's about cutting and doing the things necessary, because every department, every elected official is already accountable and has Utah code defined boundaries to help hold them responsible. So sometimes we get a little overzealous with what we think our mandate is.
Wendy?
So yeah, initially looking at it, I am a little bit concerned about that. My understanding is that there were only 5 people that were moved in. I could be wrong. You can tell me that's inaccurate. But it would be something that I would want to look at. Obviously, it's not something that makes sense to go in saying I'm absolutely going to get rid of people. I wouldn't want to, wouldn't want to go there. But assessing how fast we're going to grow and when we need new people, that level of transparency that I'm committed to would be to justify those additional people at the outset before we go in and we get approval and then fill those positions. So I think the people of Utah County need to know why we need those positions before we hire them, and they very well may need them. It just needs to be out there for the people to see. But it would be something that I would look at. The speed of the growth is a concern. It may not be inaccurate to need to have them, because there may have been deficits beforehand and we're just catching up. But it would be something that I would look at.
All right, thank you, each of you, on that issue. The next question is, I think, a transparency question. We've had some talk earlier tonight about the importance of transparency. It's kind of, whoever submitted it, it's a bit of a long question, so I'm going to try to summarize the question, and then I think it's probably a 30-second answer, but if you want more than 30 seconds, you can take a little bit more time. It's regarding the referendum that was done. I believe this was last year. Residents for Responsible Government filed and obtained a referendum in protest of the tax increase proposal in Utah County. And it talks about how residents signed the petition. It fell short of the threshold. And it says that part of the issue in falling short was that 73% of the names that were disqualified from the petition were considered unregistered. And that's in quotes, unregistered. So there were grandma requests that were submitted requesting the names that were not counted, but the requests were denied. And it says that Josh, the chief deputy, said he would provide the names, but later changed his mind. And so, without saying what the whole story is there, we'll give you each a chance to respond to that. The question is, if you are elected to the position of clerk auditor, would you allow the sponsors of the referendum to see the names that were disallowed in the packets? So give us a yes or no and explain why you would or would not do that. And I think we're on Greg, then Wendy, then Josh on my rotation.
So my answer is yes. This group actually has asked me for help, and I actually helped them start the petition process. This is part of what I mean by everything should be open. There is a number of reasons why it should be open. Again, I'm not necessarily questioning the validity of how and what was done, but if we have nothing to hide, then we would always be transparent and be open. Therein lies part of my problem. It should be open. It shouldn't be something that has to be done. Sometimes we force people to get a grandma request, and they shouldn't have to. We should just do it as government, especially in Utah County. We know better than that.
Go ahead, Wendy.
So yeah, without rehashing the whole thing and going into areas, in my opinion, if there's a grandma request and there's no legal reason not to provide that information, I assume because the organizers of the referendum were getting public signatures and it's publicly available, there would be no reason not to give them that information.
And Josh?
I think the best response here is red herring. And the reason why is that, so number one, Julie Blaney, the primary sponsor, was invited to come into the office. She came into the office and spent hours with our staff, watching over the process of signature verification, examining the packets, seeing examples of names that were unregistered. As to the denial of a grandma request for names, that's completely false. There is no such record as the names that were not registered. That record is the packet itself. if you have a packet and you have 100 names in the packet and 50 of those names are not registered voters, we don't have a special digital system that will tell you the 50 names on the packet that are names that didn't exist in the voter registration system. That's the problem. You go in the voter registration system and you say, who of the registered voters have signed this packet? I will mark that registered voter as having signed the packet. Well, what about somebody who's not registered to vote? Yeah, I don't know what to tell you. They're in the packet, but they're not in the voter registration system. We don't create some sort of a digital file of those names. So basically what the petitioners would need to do is just go look at the packets they turned in, which they have copies of all of those packets. In fact, they had to submit images and scans of each of the packets as part of the submission process. And we invited them to come in and make copies if they wanted copies and they wanted to see the names in the packet. But that's part of the problem, is that when you get a packet with signatures and there's people that aren't registered to vote, the record of who that person is in the packet, not in the voter registration system. Another misnomer is some people believe we throw the name out when it's an inactive voter. That's not accurate. If you're a registered voter, you get credit for having signed it. In fact, if you are a registered voter but you're inactive and you sign the packet, then the mere signing of the packet when our office processes it is something that makes you an active voter. The inactive voters actually become active by virtue of having signed a petition. And so we gave to the petitioners digital lists of all of the names that we did verify. The ones that were not verified, well, there's no digital record of that. And so I think there's just some miscommunication, misunderstanding, and confusion about that.
All right, thank you each for your answers. The next question I have is another interesting part of the job that we haven't dealt with yet. And I've got to flip over to my other screen here. It says, should the county clerk issue marriage licenses to couples of the same gender or follow the Utah Constitution, which defines marriage as a union of one man and one woman? So let me flip back to my screen here. So the question is involving marriage licenses and the issue of issuing the same-sex marriage licenses. I think my rotation is Wendy first, then Josh, then Greg on this one. And I think we'll go 1 minute and then we're close to finishing up with closing statements.
That would be something that I would need to look into legal counsels, because my understanding is that with the Obergefell and the Supreme Court, that may potentially be a problem for the Utah Constitution. So it would be something that would require legal counsel on, and not being an attorney. If you wanted a database on it, I could give it to you, but I'm not a legal scholar, and I would want to quote from legal.
Thanks, Josh.
Yeah, so the rule of law is that the thing that rules is the law. If you like it, if you don't like it, if you agree with it, if you don't agree with it, to a point Wendy made earlier, the only law that you get to ignore is a law that's violating another higher law like the Constitution, and then you can set yourself up for a dispute, which kind of led to this particular case, right? Where the voters of the state of Utah said, we want a state constitutional amendment that defines marriage and would have the effect of prohibiting same-sex couples from getting official marital recognition in Utah. And then the higher law, if you will, the federal Constitution through the Supreme Court process said, nope, that violates people's right to equal protection. And so as clerk, my job is to uphold the law as it is. And right now that law is no longer in dispute. It has been resolved. It is a legal reality in Utah that the rule that is the law that rules, says that same-sex couples are entitled to marital rights in Utah. So we'll follow the law. And that's how we'll always do things. We'll follow the law. Unless there's an opportunity for a dispute where a higher law governs, and we'll follow the Constitution in that regard.
And Greg?
I couldn't agree more with Josh's comments. The only difference that I would add is there is a little loophole as far as there's a difference between issuing marriage licenses and performing, which as a commissioner and clerk auditor, you are given that authority to actually perform those. Under the state law, if you perform one, you have to perform them for all for equal. So that was why I did make the choice as commissioner, even though I was asked to perform a few marriages, to not perform them, because my personal beliefs here are a little different, obviously, than the law. I do respect everybody, and therefore you do have to follow the law, and I respect the law. That's what my religion teaches me, so I would. However, it doesn't mean that it doesn't go against my core beliefs.
All right, thanks for your answers on that question. It's been great getting to know each of you candidates tonight. Hopefully this has been really helpful to the Central Committee members who will be voting, and also any other interested voters that have been tuning in. And so we really, again, appreciate each of you participating. We plan to finish up at 8:30. I've got 8:27 on my clock, so we've got 3 minutes left. So I'm gonna have each of you do a 1 minute final statement of why they should vote for you. The question that I had here was what qualifies you over your opponents, but I guess that would be why they should vote for you. And so going to my rotation, it looks like I've got Josh, Greg, and Wendy is the order we'll finish up in. So thanks again. Let's go through these final statements. Josh?
Great. Thank you all for coming tonight. I think something that sets me apart is my record of success previously, my laser focus on efficiency, which really is a functionary type job. We do these functions of county government. We want to do them effectively and efficiency, keeping costs low. Also, leadership experience can't be understated. With a team like we have, and when you're managing employees in the public sector, the way you get good outputs is you inspire people to come together under a vision. And I've got a track record of doing that in the office. We've really been successful in transforming the culture and getting more for the taxpayer in terms of service from the same team that was there before. And we can continue that. And I'd like to be a part of that process.
Greg?
Yeah, so I also have a track record of low taxes, cost cutting when I was at the county as commissioner. And so to me, I've never been somebody who's ever asked anybody to vote for me. I've never attacked any of my opponents, because to me, that's a very sacred choice. I don't think there's a wrong choice. The other day, I got to have a softball question from Skylar about Wendy and say something nice about Wendy. I could do that about Josh too. Josh, first off, any person who serves in the military, they have my respect no matter what. And his service to what we do, he also would make a great candidate. I have no problem with any of these individuals. I just know that if you want somebody who is more for limited government and as far as not growing with a different perspective on how to do it, that would be a choice on why you would select me over the others, not because they're not great candidates themselves.
Thank you. And Wendy?
Well, just thanks to everybody, and thanks to my worthy opponents. Couldn't agree more with the assessment that it's fun. It's fun to run with people that are willing to have these discussions and these debates and feel like the county is going to be in good hands. The question is really one of direction, and where do you see that the most important focus needs to be, and where I feel like I can throw my hat into the ring and say, what are my skills and my strengths? And that is in opening up government systems, being able to disagree in a very agreeable fashion, being able to work with people who see things differently, but appreciating that debate and that discussion. I also think that I would be able to maybe smooth some things over. It seems like sometimes county government, there always seems to be, there's a little bit of drama, and I think I could probably help smooth those things over with the ability to disagree respectfully. And then, as I said, with my tech background, I think where things are coming more and more technologically based, I think it's important to be able to see things like when we were bringing in more one-to-one computer systems, I was very aware that there were going to be data privacy issues that other people didn't see coming. And so I think there are things that come with that background that will help us going into the future. But I'm just grateful to be able to have this opportunity to discuss issues that are important, and to throw my hat into the ring. And I say thank you to all of you, and I'm appreciative of this process. And I just love the idea that this is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, and that average people can throw their hat in the ring to serve. Thank you.
All right, once again, thank you, each of you candidates, Central Committee members who are doing your duty, representing your precincts, and each of the interested voters tonight. Thank you to the Platform Republicans PAC members, especially Lisa Shepard, who helped set this up. Our intent, in case somebody missed this, or you know somebody in your precinct that might want to watch it, or your area, your district, is to have this video ready to go tomorrow and try to get it up on our Facebook page, Utah Platform Republican PAC on Facebook. So thanks again, and we will now adjourn. Good night, everybody.